Look at it, and I think this will bless you. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 12. So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceive that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. So I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me. For all is vanity, and a striving after the wind. I hated all my toil, in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Yet he will be master of all, for which I toiled, and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun. Because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. What is a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and all his work is a vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy, but to the sinner he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. You should have noticed a transition in verse 24. We'll talk about that when we get there, because there is a change there. But let's go back to verse 12. If you guys are all in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 12. And again, I had some notes. There's a few left up here. I don't know if I don't put them on the table, or anybody comes can grab them or something, or someone can hand them out. I don't know. But make sure everyone who comes still get the notes. Yeah, Betty, could you take those? And if you haven't got notes, just raise your hand, and Betty will get you one. Yeah, no problem. All right, so check it out. I know some of you have Bibles open. That's good, or a Bible on your phone. If not, there's also Bibles in the foyer, and you can use the Bibles in the foyer if you'd like, or someone could grab you one. So those are available for your use as well. So let's start here in verse 12, what King Solomon says. Now, guys, help me out. What is King Solomon's bio? What do you remember about his bio? You know, who is this man? He's a ladies' man? What makes you say that? How many concubines did he have? 300. How many wives did he have? 700. You know, Wilt Chamberlain. Anybody remember Wilt Chamberlain?
Yeah.
Super tall guy. Quite the baller. Most points ever scored in a game. In a book he put out before he died, claimed to have slept with 20 to 30,000 women. That was kind of like the big point when that book came out, the thing that everyone was talking about it. 20 to 30, they averaged it out. It would have to have been like, for every day he was alive, like 3.5 or something. May have been an exaggerated claim, but he was known to score a lot. So, you've got Wilt claiming this. Why didn't he stop at just a few? You know, what's the deal? There's an insatiable appetite that we as humans have And without the Spirit checking it, it will run absolutely wild. Yeah. You may, well, I'm not doing what Wilt did. Yeah, but maybe you work 20 hours a day on your job. That's your thing, but you're not satisfied. You can worship your job, you can worship family. The heart is an idol factory. King Solomon had an idol of women, power, and it literally manifested in himself worshiping foreign gods. So he knows about that. What else is his bio, King Solomon? What else do you guys know about him? Son of David? Yeah, he was the son of David from Bathsheba. And it was quite an event for him to get to the throne. Basically, he had to kill all his political rivals. It was quite a mess when he came to the throne. He was tested. Son of David. He was blessed with wisdom. God came to him in a dream in the night. The Bible says, what do you want? He says, I want wisdom. Yahweh was pleased with that choice. He was given wisdom, but this shows us even a wise person can be a fool. It's a shocking thing to imagine that same Solomon, what he did. But he is the author. I understand there's people who disagree, but either way, we have someone who basically is doing an experiment. You guys know, remember a science experiment? Anyone remember the scientific method, the basics of it? Got to have a hypothesis, and you start running some tests to test it out, right? And then you observe, and you do it again and again and again to find out if the experiments render your hypothesis true or false. But you got to repeat it. You got to do it a lot, right? You can't just do it once. Solomon is sort of doing a science experiment, in a sense, with life. What makes man and woman fulfilled? What makes man and woman complete? What makes them feel empty? There's a lot more ways to be empty than there are to be filled. You ever heard 6 million ways to die, choose one? But there's only one way to live, right? Keep on breathing, heart still beating, head still working. Lots of ways to die. Same thing, there's lots of ways as a human to be empty. There's some gamer and all he does is game. There's some workaholic and all he does is work. There's some klepto and all they do is steal, and they're all empty. And a lot of us in this room were those people. Maybe still want to go back to that life, but we know it's empty, don't we? Kind of like MTV. It was MTV. That's why I call it MTV. It was MTV. Yeah, you know. I used that in a poem once. So Solomon is turning his attention to wisdom, to madness, to folly, sort of the insanity of life. And this little phrase here, what he's saying is, whoever comes after me can explore this same issue. But since I conducted a science experiment, they'll get the same answer about emptiness and fullness, folly and wisdom in life. That's what he's saying in 2:12. That's why I got that little paraphrase. And see, kings have advisors, don't they? Even now, the president. No president is an expert on Russia or China or the tech industry or agriculture. They have people who speak on all those things, right? Only half of them are probably really experts. You know, it's an oxymoron, right? Government intelligence. It's an oxymoron. But you get the idea. So kings need wise advisors, and yet Solomon, a king who's wise himself, is spending his time in this book pointing out the folly of wisdom. What he's saying is wisdom is limited. He has a pessimistic view of the usefulness of wisdom in life. This is the pessimistic side. Proverbs, also penned largely by Solomon, is the positive view. It's under the sun, but it's under God as well. It's Proverbs. Because Proverbs says, get wisdom. Everything it's worth it to give everything up to get wisdom, right? If you've read Proverbs, you know this. She's pictured as a woman crying aloud in the streets. Simpletons, stop being fools. Listen to what I'm saying to you. So the people that think the Bible is anti-woman, wisdom is pictured as a woman. I'm just saying. So you look here and you see Solomon doing this, saying, wisdom has been exposed as a failure. If that's all you have, it by itself is merely human wisdom. Now when we go to verse 13, though, it's almost as if he's contradicting himself, because he points out there's some advantage or gain, yitron in Hebrew, in wisdom, but not as the ultimate source of reliance. I was watching a movie about the CIA the other day, and it was based upon a true story, and one of the CIA affiliates in the other country said, how did the American intelligence not know anything about this? And he said, well, we can't be right all the time. They're not really right all the time. It's sort of a joke. But you think about all the intelligence failures. You think about the so-called the best of the best, the brightest of the bright. They don't know. They make mistakes. They make errors. The wisest we have is folly compared to God's sight. And it's folly even judged by other humans. 1,000 years later, the smartest people, oh, they thought that back then, those idiots, right? There's sort of a chronological snobbery that sometimes we have, even though we can't figure out who built the pyramids, so we just say aliens, because apparently the people weren't smart enough. I think we pretty much know how the Egyptians did it, though. I'm just saying. The point is, though, human wisdom by itself is not an ultimate thing that you can rely on. Some of you are like, that's good, because I don't feel very smart. But here's the thing about it. When it says wise and fool in the Bible, it's not talking about someone with a low IQ. It's talking about someone who will not be instructed. It's talking about somebody who's not interested in learning from God. So biblically, you can be wise by the world's standards, but be a fool. Do you see? And that's why you have scientists today, if you ask them where everything came from, they'll say, well, there appears to be design here, but it couldn't have been from God. So perhaps aliens from another life put life on our planet, and they're the ones who created us. It's actually called panspermia. A lot of scientists advocate it as how life got here. Few problems with that. One is it doesn't explain the aliens, how they got there, because you still have to have an origin point for them. All it does is push the problem back further. But without God, this is the kind of thing we're all left with. And guess what? Solomon notes in 2:14, the same event happens to us all. Steve Jobs is dead. And so is the original janitor at Apple. I don't know his name. They all die. You can walk around all arrogant and cocky, and the guy who eats potato chips every day can live 20 years longer than you. You could be the smartest guy in the room, and a crane can fall on you when you're driving home. We're so arrogant and cocky, and Solomon reminds us the same thing happens to you that happens to the person you think is an idiot. But the Bible's version of fool, though, again, is one who will not be instructed in the ways of God. So, the instruction we must receive is from the Lord. That's why the Bible says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. That's the beginning of wisdom. That's why David could say, I become wiser than all my teachers. He wasn't being arrogant. It's because of his reliance upon the Lord instead of human wisdom. And you got to ask yourself, what do you do? Do you truly rely on the wisdom of the Lord? I don't mean when you're doing math, you don't know and so you pray to God. I'm talking about your day-to-day. Do you just make decisions without taking it to the Lord? Do you ask what the scriptural application is? Whose wisdom do you really rely on? Is Dr. Phil or whoever is supposed to be the psychologist on TV these days, is that insight more valuable than a wise pastor's counsel or your understanding of Scripture? This challenges us in our day-to-day life. That's what the Bible says, don't lean into your own understanding. Proverbs 3:5-6. Lean on Him. So there is no cure for death. So Solomon is death obsessed because you realize it's the ultimate thing that's going to happen to everybody. There is no cure. We all die. Now, where it says the wise person has eyes in their head, any guesses what that means? What do you do with eyes? Right. So if they have eyes in their head, the wise person is able to essentially understand. Yes. Whereas the fool doesn't have eyes on their head, so they can't see. That's the poetry of this. That's what it's saying. He goes, eyes to their head. Well, everyone has eyes to their head. Unless something happened, right? What's this mean? That's what it's saying there. 2:15. Then I said in my heart, this is Solomon, self-reflection. That's why when we first started this, I said, understand this is kind of like Solomon's notebook. It's sort of like Solomon's notebook. This is self-reflection here. He says in his heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? What's the point of all this effort? I'm just going to die. And I said in my heart that this is also vanity. Something that's vain is empty. Have you ever looked at the fair when you're there and you see the giant cotton candy and you get it? Kids get it and you turn around 30 seconds later and it's gone. When you eat it, it's disappearing. It looks so big. Looked like Marge's hair. What happened? It's gone. It's empty. There's nothing there, right? That's what Solomon is saying. Wisdom without God in the picture is like. Leo, what's going on, buddy? Yeah. So you have to see, Solomon is saying that human wisdom in the sight of death, if that's all it is like cotton candy, that kind of thing, if you think about that. Vanity. Now, what Solomon is doing is creating a tension. He's saying there's some value to wisdom, and yet death is going to happen. It's the ultimate leveler. Verse 16 says, for of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. You ever seen the soldier's tomb they have in numerous places? It's the the unknown soldier. Soldier that gave up his life, sacrificed in some way, and no one knows who it was. I went to Tombstone. Anyone been to Tombstone, Arizona? Town was only open for a certain amount of time in its heyday, and in between this small amount of years, like 5-8 years, something like that, when it was really booming, they got a massive graveyard out there, like 150 people. You'd be surprised how many are unknown. You've seen it? Have you seen? Here. Yeah. Excuse me, guys. I have to help my children. A bunch of people lost their life in Tombstone trying to get rich, and now nobody knows who they were. Which is worse, that or the one that says, died while playing cards? Because there's a bunch of those there. There's all kinds of interesting. What's 4 slug less? Shot through with 4 and no more, no less, or something like what kind of eulogy is this? Like a gangster rap on his tombstone. And that's why we do tombstones. We don't want to disappear. They're not made out of cardboard or paper, right? We try to make them out of stone to try to make them last. And then some kids will go spray paint on your grave. We're forgotten. 100 years from now, will your Facebook page, will they allow it to still be up? What are they going to do with that? If it's still there, will anyone look at it? Are you going to get any more friend requests? No one will know you. They're probably, it's like, what are they going to say? You're not going to get tagged in anything. Will it still be there? What do they do with those? Will it just disappear like MySpace pages did? Your life is like MySpace. Seriously. It's gone. You may think, well, I'll be... who won the 1955 World Series? They lost to the Brooklyn Dodgers. Brooklyn! You should know this one, but you might not. It's okay. Judgment-free zone. 16th President of the United States. Oh, okay, good. I was just testing to see how bad it was in here. Not all of you guys went to Phoenix Public. That's cool. Just kidding. Yeah, think about how many presidents you don't know their name, though. It's a president. Even now, who's the king of Jordan? Who's the king of Saudi Arabia? Who's in charge of Syria? Who's in charge of Iran? Maybe North Korea? You guys know that one? You know Kim somewhere in there, right? This is not to make us feel bad. We don't even know people that are important living right now. This book is meant to remind you of death and the impermanence of your life. That's why some people are scared of it. But not reading this book is not going to make you live longer. We need to recognize we will die. And unless we are building our house upon a solid rock, it's nothing. This is painting the bleak picture of life without God in essence, living as if he doesn't exist. How the wise dies like the fool. Verse 17, so I hated life. These are suicidal thoughts. Doesn't really matter anymore. It sounds like he could be an emo singer right now. Because what is done under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and a striving after the wind. Everything is empty. What's the point? Why try? You know, there's a movement called Transhumanism, where people are trying to do things like add technology to humans and even change our DNA code, not to only enhance our life, but to make us live longer. And part of the reason is because if you have no God, you don't recognize who he is. When you die, you disintegrate into the ground. Some animal eats you, digests you because you're in the soil, defecates you out, and you feed plants. And that's all there ever is. You close your eyes, you're done. You're playing Monopoly, you played for 8 hours, and they just took the board and did that. Some of you guys are like, Monopoly, what's that? If you're under a certain age, I never, Monopoly. Imagine a game you were playing on the PlayStation and it didn't get saved. But that's real. And he's saying that's what life is like under the sun. And you think about a godless universe, that's all there is. That's why they want to extend their life with science and technology as much as they could. Do you know if the Lord does not come back, all life on earth will end? I don't mean World War III or anything like that. I mean the sun will explode. The sun is a star. It will blow up, or more likely, something massive will crash into us before then. I don't think that's going to happen. The Lord's not going to let the wayward creation have the last word. He's going to come back. But that's what humanity has to look forward to if there is no God. Everyone on earth will simply die a heat death. I remember one atheist heard this. He said, yes, but whatever looks up at that sun in the last few seconds will be more than human. He was trying to say we'll be so advanced with our technology, we'll have essentially enhanced ourselves into self-directed evolution. But it's like, okay, so let's just say that's true. You know, they're all like DC, Justice League cyborgs looking up at the heat death. So what? The game is over. It's done. There's no reset. I don't understand why an atheist thinks that's an important... But the thing is, Christians, we have to be people to think about this. Maybe you weren't taught to think about life and death. Maybe it's like, just don't worry about... Christians have to think about the reality of death. I don't mean we're the grim people. There's only one book in the Bible at this level, but there is a book in the Bible like this. Christians can't be happy-go-lucky, merely people ignoring death. We have to recognize it as a reality. We have to live in the fact that not only we, but everyone we know will die and live so accordingly. But the beautiful thing is we have hope, don't we? Amen. Jesus Christ took the sting away from death. That's why the grave has no more victory. It still is operational right now, but Jesus showed us what it's going to be. Where believers will have resurrected, brand new bodies, live eternally, imperishable, the Bible says. We'll be made to live forever, and we will live forever with the reason why we are created, enjoying God. And yes, our real family. That's eternity. That's a hope. That's why the gospel is good news. This book is bad news, but bad news comes before the good news. I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun. Especially in Phoenix, right? Literally. Especially if you work outside. Man, you start thinking about collecting welfare checks instead of going to work. You're like, man, I don't want to be out here. He's like, you can maybe work from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. That's the small little window where you won't die in the summer, right? If you're outside. I hated all my toil on which I toil in the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. Oh, I'm going to build a business for my sons. And what if your son gets hooked on heroin and he's an idiot? You can't bestow the business to him. What if your son dies at an early age? What if your daughter's not interested in a construction company? There goes your legacy, I guess, if that's all you had. You have to think about this. Or what if they get it and they squander it and ruin it? That has happened. Someone's going to come after you and get it. Sometimes it's someone we don't even like. You know? 2:19. And who knows whether he be wise or a fool? Yet he will be the master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. Who's going to get your stuff? You know, I got a lot of awesome books. I always wonder who's going to get my books when I die. And I try to think, and I'm like, man, there's not even a lot of people who care about these books I have. It's probably the most, besides actual people, as far as possessions, it's the most important thing I got. No, maybe Eric and Gabe will take a couple. But a lot of people are like, I don't want those kind of books. I don't even read. And they'll end up, this book that, I went to 8, different used bookstores to find. It'll be some Deseret bookstore shelf for 50 cents. There it is. That's why Solomon's saying, I hated labor when I thought about that. Other cultures recognize this. I got a little poem from the Egyptians. And listen to what this says. This is something called the Song from the Tomb of King Intef. They would sing this at funerary banquets when someone died. A generation passes, another says, since the time of the ancestors. The gods who before rested their tombs. The gods rested their tombs? What kind of God is that, right? Blessed nobles too are buried in their tombs. Yet those who built tombs, their places are gone. What has become of them? I have heard the words of Imhotep and Harday Death, whose sayings are recited whole. What of their places? Their walls have crumbled. Their places are gone, as though they had never been. But the Egyptians had no answer. Well, they did kind of have an answer. What are the pyramids? Those are basically giant tombs. They're actually supposed to be designed to skyrocket the person's soul into some astral realm or something like that, where they can have an afterlife existence. That's why they would have miniature figurines of all their stuff and actually bury their stuff with them, because they thought the tomb was essentially a portal to create a copy in their afterlife. The early pharaohs had the slaves who were theirs locked in there with them and buried, and they would die in there as well. Because you got to have your servants in the afterlife, right? Someone who's going to feed you grapes. Though later on, ones did figurines as replicas of those. They said, maybe we shouldn't kill all these slaves, bury them in tombs. That's kind of weird. Let's do replicas, and that's how they'll get their slaves in the afterlife. That's why they did that stuff. And then we find King Tut with all his buried treasure. Or some grave robber gets it. They were obsessed with the reality of death. That's what the pyramids were about. Yeah. Do you know what the Taj Mahal is? The tomb dedicated to some wise man. Taj Mahal, it's like famous and stuff. Most of us didn't even know that. We just knew it was the Taj Mahal. And guess what? He's still dead and has to face God, no matter the size of his tomb or not. Right. So the Egyptians had no answer. The atheist has no answer. Well, just live your best life now. Wait, did the atheist say that or Joel Osteen? My bad. That's all there is. 2:19 reminds us of the temporary nature of our stuff in our life. 2:20. I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over the toil of my labors under the sun. 21. Because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. And guess what? They also don't appreciate it. You know why the old people in your life used to tell you how hard they had to work and them going to school and coming over from Ellis Island or across the border, however they got. You know why they did that stuff partially? To let you know the sacrifice of what they went through so you could have what you have now, because you don't know. You don't know, so you don't really appreciate it. That's part of the reason. Whatever you have to go through now, you're trying to explain to your kids, they're like, oh yeah. And it's very difficult to have them actually appreciate it, isn't it? And that's the same way they thought about us. That's why when I was a kid, we used to always make fun of grandparents. When I was your age, I had to go uphill through the snow and, there's rabid dogs. Those stories, right? They just don't know. The mafia has this problem. The mob? The mobsters now are sons of mobsters. So they didn't come over. They weren't immigrants. They grew up in some suburb in Staten Island. So they don't have this old world code of silence when they get caught. So the second these young guys get caught, guess what they do? They just rat on everybody in the mafia. The mafia can't even hardly kill all their rats anymore because of that. It's a real thing. It affects even organized crime. The young guys just don't appreciate it. It's a real thing. 22. What is a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? They're saying, what do you gain from all this? What do you get from all this? You're going to see the answer is pain and grief, sleepless nights, and anxiety. That's going to be the answer of what you're going to get. For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night, his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. I'm trying to make light of it, but it's a very real thing. This is why people get hooked on some kind of sleeping medicine, because they can't still their heart, and next thing you know, and we know Christians struggle too, but we should have a different outlook. And Christ is our rest. We don't have to stone people anymore if they don't celebrate a Sabbath. Christ is our Sabbath rest. We enter into a permanent rest with him in which we can trust him. And it's a day-by-day thing. And you're going to find out here as Solomon starts to turn the corner, the answer literally is enjoy God in the moment. You are supposed to enjoy every moment. The unbeliever who says that, it's frivolous and empty because that's all they have. The moment has no lasting value, and there's no reason why that moment is present. Meaning, there's no reason why anything exists. That present moment can't have real purpose. You can make up a purpose, but that's not an objective, long-lasting purpose for that moment or the next or for time itself. We can realize God created every moment that exists and put us in it at a certain place in time for a reason. And if we are laboring and striving and enjoying for his glory, it has a permanent ramification. Jesus told a story about this, a parable. There's a fool, and he's building a house, and he builds it upon sand. He's a fool. The foolish man builds his house upon sand. But there's a wise man who builds his house upon the rock. Who is the rock? Jesus. He's saying, build everything in your life upon me. Jesus is not just another fortune cookie prophet. Here's some advice, follow it or not. He is demanding total allegiance and obedience. But the beautiful blessing is it makes your life count for something. It makes it worth it. It makes it value because it's connected to someone who is eternal. I don't know for sure, but I think we'll be in heaven talking about, I remember when I came to faith for the first time. I remember, hey, that's a brother, that's a sister who led me to the Lord. Hey, you never knowed it, but you prayed for me. I think we will talk about those stories. I think they will matter forever. Because we're building on someone who is eternal. That's why he's a rock. He's not shifting sand. Everything else is shifting sand. Public opinion, your own heart, it's all shifting sand. The money, the business, it's all shifting sand. Christ is a rock. It's the only option. You have no other option if you want stability and permanent value to your life and what you do. And I think we know that because we are created for that. 24. It's as if there's light peering through the cloud for the first time. He starts to realize, yes, it's life under the sun, but God made that sun. And it's good. And God made us with the ability to work, and we're imitating His work.